Welcome to the Bible Search and Rescue podcast. Bible Search and Rescue is part of the Westar Institute. My name is Chad Venters. I'm the host of Bible Search and Rescue, and we are going to do part two of our interview with screenwriter Robert Zappia and continue our discussion on the Halloween franchise and looking at Halloween as story and evolution, metaphor, all these great things. Robert, thank you so much for being here for part two. Part one, we left off on the cliffhanger, which was here you are. How old are you whenever you wrote Halloween 7? You're 20 what?
I am 25, 26.
All right, so
Like
you're a
when I
pup.
first get hired, I am a
Yeah,
pup.
yeah.
And, my first writing gig was at, I think I mentioned in part one, was on a sitcom series called Home Improvement. I
Mm-hmm.
was 23 when I got that job. So I had been writing in sitcoms for about 3 years at that point. So yeah, I was 25, 26 when I got the gig.
You mentioned in part one, I meant to ask you this. You mentioned in part one that you wrote a spec for X Files. Did you ever have an episode of X Files that you wrote?
I did not.
Shoot, I love X Files
I
too.
did
That's a
not.
great
And I
series.
got such great, I'll send you the script if
Oh,
you're
thank you.
interested in seeing it, the spec.
Absolutely.
It got me so many meetings, but they always tell you never write a spec for the show you want to write for.
Mm.
Because those people read it, the people who aren't familiar in the writer's room, they read it and oh, this is amazing. This is so great. People who are on the show, oh, oh, this is terrible. Oh, we would never do that. He would never say that. Like they know the show so well. There's no way you can know it as well as them. When I was on Home Improvement, you'd have people who want to be on staff writing specs. Like we'd get Seinfelds, we'd get Frasers. You know, oh, this is
Hmm.
great. Someone would write a Home Improvement. Oh, no, Tim would never say that. Jill, oh, this is ridiculous. It's just you're not. You shouldn't do it. Was at the time kind of the thing. So no, I didn't even get a meeting at
Oh,
X Files. Like nobody, I know they sent it to them, but they probably read it and thought, "Fool,
well, I'm going to
he
say
knows
their
not our
loss
show."
because yeah, because you, sir,
Thank you,
you
Chad.
know what you're
I
doing. Yeah.
showed
So
them.
yes, you did. And by the way, Robert has very graciously shared various screenplays with me to look at the evolution of H2O. He very good at archiving this material. So yeah, I'd love to read it. It's good stuff, and I like screenplays anyway. My son, who's
Yeah.
19, he's doing a screenplay class this semester, and he had to buy
Okay.
like I guess I don't know at the time. Was there $300 software to do a screenplay, or did you just have to format that on your own?
Okay. So that's a great question. By that point there was Final Draft, and that's what I used.
Okay.
The a little tidbit. When I was on Home Improvement, Final Draft like 1.0 was out. It might have been Final Draft Beta.
Hmm.
And I knew the programmer directly, and we kind of
Hmm.
tested it on Home Improvement. It was bombing, crashing all the time. At the time when you had a Macintosh, if the program would crash, a little window would
Hmm.
pop up with a literal bomb. It had a bomb like with the fuse. I saw that many times. But anyways, yeah. So at that point, and it was very expensive. Yes, it was expensive. Final Draft to this day, I believe, is still the leader as far as
Probably. So that's probably
software.
what he has. So he was like, "Yeah, there's another $300 for this semester. I'll just keep forking that over." Okay. Okay. So you you give Two Faces of Evil. You get called back into the room, and they tell you we really like the draft, but what's the but?
Yes. So I turned in the first draft, and you're waiting, you're waiting. I don't hear anything. I think maybe I heard from Mustafa or Paul Freeman that they were happy with it, but that was kind of like it. And you're waiting for the next step. And at any point, you can get booted, Chad. Like there's that. At any point, they're not happy with something. The writer is so disposable. It's a sad reality in Hollywood. Like even if it's your original property and they love it and they've hired you and you do a couple drafts and they're not happy, they'll just boot you and bring another writer on. So that's the reality at any point. But then I get a call from my agent that says Bob Weinstein wants to meet with you.
Hmm.
Okay. Now I had never met Bob. or talked with him at the time. So this was the first. So, and it was the only time I met with him in person. So they set up this meeting at Dimension, and they're in Beverly Hills or on Melrose. And, go in there and he says, I've got good news and bad news. I said, okay. He's like, the bad news is, read your script. We're not going to make it.
Hmm.
I'm just, oh my God. Like my mind's just like, oh, I screwed up. Like he called me in here to tell me how bad my script was. He said, the good news is uh, Jamie Lee Curtis is coming back for the 20th anniversary of Halloween, and we're going to have you write that. I'm like, oh. Woo! Yes. And I believe he said, so if there's a way we want to keep the school, if there's a way you can write her in as maybe the headmistress of the school rather than the other character I had, I think was a gentleman in the Two Faces of Evil that was like the headmaster of the school.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, I can't possibly do that, Bob.
Yeah. What did your brain do when you hear that you're going to be writing a Halloween film with Jamie Lee Curtis in it?
My brain went to, I can't wait to call my wife and tell her this. Like, it was just, I was in the car, like in my head, I'm in the car and I'm on the, telling her because, had told her how nervous I was going in. Like, why is he calling me in? What's this mean? What's happening? No one's told me anything, but it's because they were hiding the ball. They wanted to surprise me, which was sweet. Yeah. But once I got past that, got to mix of emotions, Chad. It was panic.
Oh yeah.
It was, just I was thrilled. I was already converting the original draft into what elements do they want? What elements do they want to change? So yeah, it was an exciting time. Oh, and I believe he said, and it's going to be theatrical release. It's not going to be direct to video. It was like all those things. Now, thankfully, having written not in this genre, not for features, but having written in television for 3-4 years, I wasn't a newbie in the sense that, okay, I had written many drafts. I had things produced. Home Improvement was the #1 show. I had worked with different actors. I had worked with different directors and producers and gotten network notes and gotten studio notes. So all that wasn't foreign to me. Well, but this was in a genre I loved and a franchise I loved and was, an actress I loved. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
So mind blowing. Everything has just changed. So now you have to go back and you have to revamp this because now it's a Jamie Lee Curtis Halloween film. So that's going to mean, I'm assuming, and again, I'm not a Hollywood insider, but I'm assuming that the budgetary difference between a straight to video Halloween and a Jamie Lee Curtis Halloween would be different. Am I accurate in that assessment?
Yes, I believe it was 15 times probably the budget.
That's okay. So that's a pretty decent budget. So you've got this new budget, and now you've got to start basically rethinking everything because your focus in some regards in your drafts largely shifts from doing what so many of the horror films do, is where they kind of focus on these young, like sexually active kids as some sort of, PSA on abstinence or whatever, to focusing on the fact that now you've got the centerpiece of the Halloween world back confronting her nemesis. So you did several drafts, and we want to hear some stories about how those worked out. But was your first iteration Blood Ties?
Blood Ties was definitely one of the earlier iterations and probably the first. I looked through them again. I had emailed you that I was hoping I had some time to go back through them because, like I said, 30 years, and there were numerous drafts. I probably did 6 drafts. I think I sent you 3: Two Faces of Evil, Blood Ties, and Revenge of Laurie Strode.
Yeah.
But I think I did 6 or 7. And Blood Ties was definitely one of the early ones. I could tell by the endings because I remember specifically the different notes I would get. From the different people involved. But yeah, so I think Blood Ties was a very early draft, if not the first.
Yeah. So now there's this shift where you've got Laurie Strode, although she's not necessarily known as Laurie Strode, because as the story evolves, there's elements of Two Faces of Evil still tied into the script as it develops. And by the time we get to H20 itself, the story is radically different. I mean,
Yes.
it's definitely evolved a lot. But so in Two Faces of Evil, you have this detective who's kind of working the case, and that detective still survives into the original iterations where he's kind of trying to track these killings that may or may not be a Michael Myers killing. And now he's sort of made his way into the setting with Blood Ties. When you first set out, you got an all girls school. What is your take on how are you trying to make this all work with Jamie Lee now?
Well, there was a lot of directives coming from different people,
Okay.
right? So I believe having the detective we threw out was a Mustafa Trenkus International directive, which was they lost, Loomis,
Yeah.
sadly. Oh, how I would have loved to have written for him. So you lost Donald Pleasance, but they wanted to fill that role.
Yeah.
So they wanted to act as if, in essence, he was still a character. He wasn't Donald Pleasance, but they wanted that thread of a detective, kind of the law following Michael throughout. So
Mm-hmm.
that was that directive, and that's why he remained through many of those drafts up until he was eventually cut. And there was a big kind of conflict between Dimension and Trancas at one point, where it actually went to court, and I had to stop writing for 6 months because they were fighting over creative. So that was one directive. So that's why that character was there. Then you had Jamie Lee Curtis, who was like, "Hey, I want to come back. If I'm going to come back, I want my character to be struggling with these things. I want her to have been an alcoholic. I want her to still be struggling, with sobriety daily. I want her to be, so she had her points that you're listening to. And then you had Dimension, and you have Dimension saying, "Oh, this is going to." I think they knew this is going to revive the franchise. It was the hope, which is what it did, and uh, so we want this to be big. We want this to be have a big ending. We don't want, we want to, Michael. We want it to be over for Michael. But then you had Trancas saying, "Heck no, that's our IP. You're not. No,
Mm-hmm.
he can get shot 6 times. He can be, blown up. He can be set on fire. But uh, cutting off the head, there's no coming back from. So we're not going to be doing that." So there was a lot of, different things you're juggling as a writer. You're trying to make it all work. You're trying to appease everybody, and right when you appease everybody, you appease no one. As they say.
That's correct. So, so we're gonna have to hit back on the point of fate because, in a sense, whereas fate played such a role in Halloween and Halloween H2O in the scripts, fate also played a role with you in this because, like you said,
Mm.
there were elements of your trying to bring all this to life that, in some regards, radically shaped how the story ends and then how it's retold. Now, this is, I think, an important thing to jump into because, once again, for the youngins at home, prior, before the Marvel multiverse of madness and all this other thing,
Yes.
something that we had
Yes.
touched on when we talked about this late in 2025 was that at the time, in comic books, yes, but not necessarily in movies, one did not typically just ignore the previous installments, right? That
Unheard of.
yeah, you didn't do that. You jump in, and I'm curious to know what the decision was. Essentially, what your film did was establish a Halloween multiverse because yours says 1 and 2 happened. Everything after that is myth. It's urban legend. It's something else. There's some indication from the opening of the final film that Loomis had been tracking these stories, but overall, she wasn't dead. She didn't have a daughter, right? All of those types of things. How did that decision play out at the time when that was really not something people did?
That's a great point, Jack, because you're right. It absolutely was not something you did. Like this idea of like starting over, rebooting, multiple timelines, multiverses, it just wasn't a thing.
Mm-hmm.
So the challenge there in the earlier drafts was incorporating those things. Um, and so we had a scene in an early draft, and it might have been in Blood Ties, where someone's giving a report in the class that Carrie Tate, who is the Laurie Strode character, is subbing for a class, and one of the
Hmm.
students is doing a report on a book about serial killer Michael Myers, and
Hmm.
she talks about how this adopted daughter is killed somehow. Like she kind of goes through all the things and kind of ties some kind of bow on it that connects it. It's not quite exactly what happened, but it addresses it to some degree. At
Hmm.
least 4 and 5, maybe not 6, but because I think they were fine with kind of tossing 6, but they wanted to address 4 and 5 to some degree. So there was acknowledgement in early drafts that she did have a daughter that she gave up for adoption, but he still found her. And then this is the first she's hearing about it. She ended up running out of the room and throwing up in the bathroom because she hadn't heard this before. And I believe it was Dimension Films that said, let's just consider this a trilogy, which, like
Hmm.
you're saying, was like, well, oh, can we do that?
Are we
Are
allowed
people
to?
going to accept that? And they were like, yeah, it's just too much. It's too much.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting about it is, you know, the comic book genre had done this many times over the years, right? But even comic books, like in the 1980s, when DC did Crisis on Infinite Earths, that was an attempt to clean up their timeline, right? To kind of revamp it and to sort of streamline it. There was in some sense this idea of how do we streamline these things. And so it's really fascinating and kind of cool and experimental that you all said, no, we're just going to lean into it and we're going to divert the timeline, right? So now you have established a Halloween multiverse to some degree by the end of this. And so your early drafts definitely allude back to the original. So you start talking like there's the scene in the classroom. In H20, it was the conversation about Frankenstein.
Yes.
In your earlier drafts, it's the conversation about the Aeneid and the idea
Right.
of Aeneas and his destiny to found Rome. And so that's those little things. There were elements from the beginning
Correct.
that make their way in there. I have one question to ask you, though. It's something that stood out. In the early
Okay.
iterations of the draft, you have a scene where there's a gym that's a pool, and there's a retracting like court or a floor that goes over the pool. And so like the young people can dance on the floor and then it retracts. And then at one point there's a dead body in the pool. Is
Correct.
this a real thing? Are there actually these floors that retract and they have pools under them where you can like have dances and retract to a pool? Is this real?
I'll tell you why I believe it is.
Okay.
Because I saw it in a movie. I'll tell you what movie I saw it in, Chad. I believe it's a Wonderful Life.
Okay.
And there's a scene, and I'm pretty sure I know it was Jimmy Stewart. I'm pretty sure it's a Wonderful Life where they're in the gym and they have a dance and they're dancing and the floor opens up and they all just start jumping in the pool and dancing. It's obviously a very merry moment, kind of a fun moment.
Hmm.
And I thought, hmm, that's interesting. What if we took that idea and made it the horror version of It's a Not So Wonderful Life? So I will say it did exist at one point in the
Hmm.
30s.
Good
Does it
enough.
exist today? This I could not tell you.
And does any
But
high school have this?
well, apparently, probably not because it, as you know, did not make the film. I remember at the time when I wrote it, people were super excited about it.
Yeah.
They thought it could be kind of a fun visual. But as you know, there were drafts where I had written, the budget was bigger with Jamie Lee, certainly, but it wasn't that big, right? Where you could create that if it didn't exist. We didn't have sound stages. That whole school was a school in Silver Lake, California. It
Oh,
used to
okay.
be, yeah, it was a home, and then at one point it was a convent, and then it was just available.
Hmm.
So we kind of rode around the actual place in Silver
Hmm.
Lake up on the hill. So there wasn't the money to kind of create these things. And I had written a scene. Steve Miner at the time had been hired, but I wrote a scene with a bunch of buses leaving. I mean, there was that whole bus ending with it off a cliff, and he's in the bus, and they're like, "Hey, this is our whole budget. Like, there's going to be one bus that holds 20 people, and it's going to drive off. The rest is happening here at the school. Like, there won't be helicopters and buses off of cliffs and road, So I had to pull it back. I was going to Terminator with my
Yeah,
writing.
we need you to calm down, sir. Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
God, yeah,
and
please calm down.
yeah, no,
We appreciate
and
your enthusiasm, but
yes, but we're not that rich. No, and
yes,
you're, but yeah, that's one of the great things about reading through these, and I think at some point, like I talked to you about sort of our emails, I think it would be really cool for people to be able to see how the story evolved because it's a very fascinating process. But the various ways you tried to address it, the bus falling and so forth. You're dealing with these issues, and the original climax of the movie takes place in like a bell tower, right? So at
yes,
the school, we go up into the bell tower, and there is this moment, and I'm kind of curious how it was received. In one of the drafts, one of the great cardinal rules of Halloween is broken, and that is Michael Myers actually speaks in that bell tower at one point. What was the reception to the idea that Michael Myers would actually utter a word in a movie?
that's a great question. I believe that was. Let me think about this for a moment because it survived all the way, Chad, to when he's reaching out in H2O.
Mm,
Originally, he says sister
yeah.
or he says Lori. And the argument was they already known then that they were going to say that's not him, that's a guard. And so that's someone trying to say, Lori, it's not Michael, basically. So they justified it there. I believe it was not my initial idea. I want to say that they thought in that moment it would be almost like I can't remember the logic to tell you the God honest truth. But the fact that it survived all the way to that H2O draft, I believe it was probably maybe Paul or maybe not Mustafa. I don't think it was Malik. At some point, someone thought that it would be an interesting, it's a whisper, it's a guttural, kind of almost like a grunt. It wouldn't be said very clearly, but did he just say
Sister.
something? Yeah, yeah, exactly. So it was something they were toying with, and then ultimately didn't end up going with.
Yeah, it was interesting. And by the way, you're multiversing this. Your Michael Myers is talking. You all are basically doing Sergeant Pepper's with Halloween at this point, right? You're getting
Yes.
wild. There's retracting floors. It's a thing.
Okay. Chad, can I say something? I'm sorry. I hate to
No,
interrupt your thought.
please, yeah, jump in
But
there.
in rereading these drafts, thank God I've become a better writer. A. B. Some of this stuff was cringe for me. It's so hard looking back at your work. I try not to do it, especially something I wrote 30 years ago. But there were a number of instances where, oh, you got to laugh at yourself, Chad. You got to laugh at
Absolutely.
yourself. Like he would kill someone or he'd do something, and then the victim is like, God damn you, Michael. What? Like, no, no. You just run. You're not going to curse at him. It was, anyway, cringe.
Monologue. Yeah.
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 How
Yeah.
dare you, sir?
Exactly. That's right. This is
You
one
will
of the reasons.
pay.
Yeah, this is one of the reasons why a real life. So, as somebody who runs, right, and I do distance running, and that's part of my work. Is I do work with trying to get physical fitness for some folks, right? Do that sort of thing. This is why a Halloween film would be very boring because I would just turn and run,
Run
and I
as
would
fast as you can.
and I would just pace it right and run
Yeah.
miles and miles and miles, and he would be walking, and it would be the worst Halloween film ever. So that's why we need people like you to be able
See,
to write these.
that's right. We've established that he's a slow walker. Like the guy's not in a
Yeah,
rush. You're right.
yeah. He
Just
saunters
beeline it.
everywhere, right? You
He
never see
does.
you never see Myers out there huffing it, checking his
Never.
pulse, right?
Nope.
Looking at his iWatch. All right, now we get to a big dynamic that makes H2O work really well is that Laurie does have a son. I don't think he's not originally named John in it. I don't remember what his first name was, but she originally has a son, and the dynamic of their relationship is very tense. But in early
Yes.
drafts, unlike H2O, he does not know she is Michael Myers' uh, sister. Right? So
Correct.
there's that. So how did that evolve? Because eventually you get to Josh Hartnett, and he knows the background, and he has a little bit more empathy for his mom because he knows her trauma, but he's also kind of starting to get that empathy fatigue. How did that develop as you went through the story?
Well, that's exactly why that developed. One is because he's not empathetic at all. You know, in those early drafts, he's very harsh on her. And the idea
Is he?
was that she takes those slings and arrows. She's willing to be the villain because she wants to protect him from that truth
Mhm.
and doesn't want him to know. Um, but the consistent note and kind of the consensus was, God, he's an asshole. I was like,
He was.
he's so mean to her. He's so brutal and
Mhm.
has no empathy. And then she almost looks, even though she's doing it for his sake, she almost looks weak in the
Mhm.
sense that she's just taking those slings and arrows. So it became, well, what if he did know? You know, and he does have empathy, but he's getting older and it's kind of, look, it's been 18 years. The guy's not coming. He's not coming after you. Like, can we let it go now? So it's a little more, he has empathy for his situation. He has empathy for her situation. He wants her to move on so he can move on. You know, it becomes much more of a collaborative kind of dynamic of mother and son rather than, just, the guy's a jerk up until the
Yeah.
third act when he finds out. I think, oh, that's why. Well, why did you tell me? Like, then it became weird.
Yeah.
There was a lot to explain and go on.
Yeah. You did a great job of writing him as an ass, because there's multiple times I was reading those early screenplays where I was like, I would smack the shit out of this kid if I were there. Like, what the hell is your problem?
Yeah,
Because
he
yeah,
was
you're
terrible.
yeah, she was terrible. And so, and by the way, that's the sign to me. That's a sign of a good writer. When I'm sitting there and I'm feeling this emotion, like I just want to smack this kid. Kudos to you, because you really brought that out. What just like what a dick he was to her. But you are right. Laurie Strode in the early iterations of the Halloween, what became Halloween H2O, was not the badass we saw in H2O.
No.
She was kind of weak and more of a more scream queenish
Yes.
than what we got. Which again, kudos, because by the time we get to what, this mofo's going down right in H2O,
Yeah.
she and John had evolved dramatically in their evolution. And that's one of the fun things about looking at how it played out, is that by the time we get to the final product, Laurie's not playing right. She's
Right.
hardened. She's extraordinarily scarred. She's broken. She's dealing with all of this. And you said that those were Jamie Lee notes. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah. She had a definitive way she wanted to play the character. And she plays it so well because from a writing point of view, and it's much more challenging, I believe, from the acting point of view, is to make a character that, well, she's still struggling with her sobriety. Like you have that scene where she's at lunch with her boyfriend, Will,
Mm-hmm.
and he goes to the bathroom or something. She orders the second class. She drinks it real
Yeah.
quick and makes it look like it's. So she's weak or struggling with the sobriety. But she has to be strong in other areas, so you don't feel like she's a weak lean. And she
Mm-hmm.
is this just I have no control over my life, and she played that so well. I had it was more difficult to write that, and so she brought a lot of insight to that um,
Mm-hmm.
character,
Mm-hmm.
and she had very clear point of view, which was great.
Yeah. And one of the things that really came out in the final product for me was the factor of trauma, and
Mm,
how Halloween H2O, at least for me, it really went back to the roots of what Halloween was. Because in that first Halloween, there's so much metaphor that comes out of the nature of, looking at the suburban world. I think
right.
you can make comparisons to things like, in the 70s, ideas of white flight and all of these other things, these socioeconomic issues and how they play into the world around us. When you get to H2O, there's something more focused, and that is, we were at a time in the 90s where things like trauma and confronting trauma and pain are starting to become at least more accessible at a time when they were still, quite stigmatized. And you brought that out brilliantly in the story. For her, Michael Myers is her trauma.
Yes.
What did you draw from to try to make that work? How did the trauma piece really develop in your mind?
Well, again, a lot of it was Jamie Lee's insight
Mm-hmm.
into the character and bringing that to the forefront and doing a lot of research. And at the time in '96, it wasn't, I mean, the internet was a thing, but it wasn't what it is now. So I read a lot of books on it. I talked to some psychiatrists and psychologists,
Hmm.
and listened to interviews. Which at the time, guys, I don't think there was YouTube in '96.
No.
So we weren't calling up YouTube. It was finding, I think, through my agent, getting tapes of interviews with people who had suffered at the hands of crimes victims, who had escaped kind of horrific events in their life, and trying
Hmm.
to fold that into this narrative. Again, trying to ground it was always what I wanted to do from the very beginning, was kind of ground it in real emotion and reality, because to me that's what makes it so scary.
Yeah.
Even though the
Yeah.
character is fictitious, the emotion's
But
real.
yeah, it's that sort of objective correlative, right? That way in which we see these things that correlate to the real world around us. That's part of what makes H2O work. Is it's not just like, oh my gosh, let's have sex, right? There's you get into that film. There's not a breast in sight. There's not a sex scene, and you also have an excellent young cast of
Yeah.
four that drive that story. And did the casting of Michelle Williams and Josh Hartnett shape the way that the writing developed?
Not to a large extent, because they came
Okay.
on pretty close to when filming started. It was a ride, Chad. Like it was.
Hmm.
I was told at the time by the Dimension executive Richard, like this is not how it typically goes. Like you're going to get spoiled by this experience. And I thought, oh come on, I can tell you now, 30 years later, that is not how it goes. Like it was probably within the span. And I'm talking with the court and having to stop down writing and everything else, and going from not Jamie Lee to Jamie Lee. It was all happened within a 12 to 16 month period to release.
Damn.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
insane. So Steve came on maybe 6 weeks before they started filming. Maybe might have been less. And that's when the
Wow.
casting. I was doing drafts for him, and then you have the casting. It was all happened simultaneously. Obviously, Jamie Lee had a huge impact. Not so much Josh. It was his first film.
Right.
And same with he dies in the opening. I'm blanking on his name from Third Rock from the Sun.
Oh yeah,
Shame on me.
Joseph Gordon-Levitt.
Thank you. That was his first
Yeah.
film, and uh, it was a lot of their, like you said, they were young and kind of upcoming, and it was exciting. But it was pretty much as written.
Yeah.
I don't know that there's a huge influence. There might have been, Matt Greenberg came aboard during production and did rewrites.
Hmm.
So that might be the case that informs some of those kind of scene dialogue rewrites might have happened
Mm.
because of the actor, which is absolutely typical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So to not miss out on this, is it Chris Durand was your
Yeah.
Michael? Talk a little bit
Yes.
about just tell us a little bit about him. What was he like?
Oh, he's the sweetest guy. We still, we're in contact. Sometimes we'll go to conventions where we'll be there at each other, but he's just the sweetest guy. And my experience, my first introduction to Chris, so I hadn't met him before. So they're filming, and it's discouraged, frankly, Chad, for the writer to go to the set,
Hmm.
just in
Interesting.
general, because I think the fear is you're gonna be like, that is not as written, or that is, how dare you, it's just not who I am. I was just a fan. Like I want to be on a set. I want to be
Hmm.
there and see. You can do whatever you want with it at this point. My work is done. So I went on the set of in Silver Lake at that what used to be a convent that was the school. Jamie Lee was amazingly gracious with me, very kind. Had me go to her bungalow. It was like a bungalow dressing room, and watch dailies, and
Hmm.
it was sweetest. And Steve Myers great, and Darren Okada, who was the DP. Everybody great. But it was in between takes, and it was a take with Michael Myers in full mask, and I'm just waiting for it to start filming again, and you can just sense someone's behind you, and
Hmm.
and so I turn, and it's Michael Myers in full, with the knife, and he's like, "Hey," I'm like, "Hey," he's like, "You're Robert Zappia?" "Yeah." Yeah. He goes, "I'm a writer." I said, "Oh, you are?" He goes, "Yeah." He goes, "Maybe you could, yeah, you would, read one of my scripts or something." I was, absolutely, sure. Chad, I'm standing there talking with Michael Myers with a chef's knife saying he writes. Everybody's a writer, Chad.
That's
Everybody's
right.
a writer. But
Everyone's
it
a
was so
writer.
surreal. But he's, anyways, it was one of those moments, surreal moments where the guy has a knife. I'm not going to say no,
Uh,
but a talented. I thought he would did such a great job because you start talking about you watched all the Halloweens. Well, there were different, obviously, the shape, Michael Myers, and boy, it is an art to play that character.
mhm.
Tony Moran, the OG, did an amazing job, as well as some other actors. But I thought Chris was so good at it. Just got the setup perfect, got the
Yeah.
the physicality of it, but kind of brought his own little twist to it.
Mhm.
The coming down from the pipe.
Yeah, and he had, at least for me, I really like. So we've got our Chris Durand, Michael Myers NECA figure
There you
here,
go.
right? So, and this is
Yes.
one you can get now. I was waiting. NECA's been doing Halloweens for years. I've been finally waiting for this. One of the things I liked about his look is, Michael Myers is his level of shape and fitness over the years has morphed quite dramatically. Like some years
It
he's,
has.
he's had some gains.
Yeah.
His original, yeah, was not a big bulky guy, right? That was part of it.
No.
Is he was very live, and that's something that I thought Duran brought to it, is that he's got this very methodical look. He's got this methodical walk. He's not huge, right? He has this sort of this athletic build, but, and we're going to have to touch on this, the issue with the masks,
Oh,
because one of the things that really stood out, and it makes me appreciate his performance as this, is that this is a Michael Myers film where you actually can see his eyes.
mhm.
And that was something that added a big element to his performance, was the way he used those eyes, like the scene when they're looking through the window at each other,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
His
Iconic.
eyes, yeah, just speak volumes. But that was not the original mask. So because there was a whole mask drama, how did the mask drama evolve?
Mask Gate, as we refer to it.
Mask again.
Mask Gate. I wasn't privy to a lot of it. Again, the writer, like, once your job's done, they're kind of like, thanks for your service. Bye bye.
Yeah.
But what I had heard was they shot the entire film with this, what I call the Casper the Ghost mask. Like, that mask to me, the one that doesn't, and you can only see it in very few shots of the film,
Yeah.
uh, is so far off the mark. It's too Casper the Ghost. It's like too whitewashed, or too, like, there's no features, it's kind of featureless, and you know. I guess they did test screenings, and people were just like, "What is this? This is not working." So then they
That's
I
fair.
believe, hired. This is what I hear, and it hasn't been refuted, and I've done some research. So then they hired Stan Winston, the effects
Mhm.
guy, right? I believe they said they paid him $1 million to come up with the mask that's in the film. I still don't understand why you can't. I Maybe you can't have the rights to that Shatner mask anymore, or maybe, but can't you take it and just tweak it a little bit like they did in the new ones? I think the new ones are great. It's like a little grizzled up and tattered, but it's still got that shape,
Yeah.
to it. And the hair, like, all works. So they reshot close-ups primarily with that mask that they paid seven figures for, and then they did some CGI work on the other shots.
Yes. So first of all, big kudos to your editor, because he
Oh
had no
yes,
he had no small task. And it's some
Patrick. I think. Oh no, was it Patrick who edited it and went on to direct? Now I feel bad. I believe it, and I can't. Anyways, go on. Yes,
no,
my
yeah,
father was an editor, so I have a lot of respect for editors.
yeah, and that was a hard one. So for those who have maybe not watched H2O with Eagle Eye, uh, one of the things,
Right.
and it's something I absolutely did not notice when I watched it in the theater. Right, I was just sort of engrossed in the story. You see that there is this continuity issue where it switches back and forth in the broad shots from the first mask that they did with, that you could see on like the TV spots, to the mask that ends up being the final iteration, right? So the distance, you'll see the other mask, and then he's up close, he's got that mask, right? The beautiful thing is he edited it well enough that it doesn't necessarily just pull you out of the moment. And unless you're looking for it, it's probably not going to stand out.
I agree, and it's Patrick Lussier was the
Okay.
editor,
Yes.
who's gone on to. He's a great editor. He's directed some other things, and very
Awesome.
talented guy.
Yeah. And so I mean there's a lot of work there, but I mean, there's been all sorts of stories about it. And actually, one of the fun things about the NECA figure is that it not only comes with the weird alien mask, right? So this, you can't really see it that well, but you should check
Oh,
out if you
that's what
haven't
it
seen.
is. Yeah.
Yeah,
Alien mask.
the
Exactly.
alien mask, and then there's also the weird CGI because there's the one scene with the CGI that like when he's about to kill Charlie. Oh my
Yes.
gosh, and he's kind of got this weird Frankenstein CGI mask. CGI just wasn't what it was in the 90s.
It was not.
Okay, so
It
so
was
you've got
not.
so you've got that problem dealing with the mask. It gets resolved and so forth. To me, as a fan of H2O, I know this was beyond you, and it's kind of goes back to that issue of fate. The catharsis of that ending, where
Oh,
she cuts off his head, he's reaching out for her, and there's that emotional moment, and it's done. It's over. It is the definitive moment in the Halloween franchise. And then a couple of years later, it is all for naught because
nothing.
we get resurrection. And oh, by the way, it was just some poor schlub paramedic whose throat had been crushed and somehow looked just like Michael Myers. So I'm just going to throw this out here.
Yeah.
Tell us about, because I know that this was written in stone and there was nothing you could do about it. Tell us about what led to the reversing of your beautiful Halloween H2O ending.
Oh, after, so the resurrection, how that happened?
Yeah,
Or,
how did it, just the whole thing? Because obviously you already knew ahead of time that the
yes,
beautiful ending you had written would not be held
I
to.
did. I did. So this is what happened. So Dimension very much wanted it to be an ending of all endings, right? So they wanted her to chop his head off. Like, there's no question as to whether or not the same. Mustafa was like, absolutely not going to happen. Not going to happen. I had a conversation with Bob Weinstein where he said, this is what you're going to do. You're going to turn in an ending for us that we're going to film, and you're going to turn in an ending to Mustafa that he's going to think the ending, but isn't the ending. Now, Chad, I mean, 13 years of Catholic school, not going to happen. Like, I know I have confession as an option, but I just, I said something to Bob, which was like something along the lines of, I'm not going to do that. Like, you two are adults, get on the phone and come up with a common ending.
Yeah.
I've never been called so many names in my life, Chad. He
Ooh.
oh my God, he strung together expletives like a pro and hung up on me. Um, he was not a fan at that point. What ended up happening is they went to court over it because I wouldn't do that. I wasn't going to do that. So like, tell me what one ending to write that draw on the same page, and I'll write it. So they couldn't come up with that. They went to court because Trancas said, "Look, we have creative right. Dimension, you only had distribution rights.
Mm.
You don't have any creative say." So they go to court. They go to court. They go to court. It's three or 6 months. What ends up happening, and this is very smart on their part, Dimension has Kevin Williamson come in and say to and say to Mustafa, "This is what we're going to do. It's not Michael. They're going to think it's Michael," and it pitches the whole thing. It's actually a guard, and blah blah blah. So he's not dead. We can still do Halloween 9, 10, 11, 12, on and on you go. So they settled out of court or whatever because they pulled it from court, and that's what happened. So I was able to proceed with that ending, knowing, and Jamie Lee signed a contract saying, I will do 10 minutes. I will be in 10 minutes of Halloween 9. And that's it. You can, and I think she insisted she be killed off. Like, I want to be it done. And that's what happened. I was given first shot at pitching Halloween 9,
Mm-hmm.
which I did. And I think it would have been great, but they didn't go with me. So they got what they
Did,
got.
did you think that that your refusal to play the game led to you not getting that next gig?
1,000,000%.
Okay.
A million
Yeah.
percent. Because unfortunately, and there's more to this story that we could get into or not, but unfortunately, Mustafa never believed that I told Bob where to go.
Hmm.
So I kind of he just couldn't conceive that oh, you told Bob you're not going to do that. Then you're not going to turn in an ending. I'm like, I did. I did. That's
Hmm.
why he never quite. He was like, not sure that a 26-year-old is going to turn down Bob Weinstein. I'm not saying it was wise. I'm just saying I did. It's just it's the cap and guilt thing. Couldn't do
Yeah.
it. And then of course Weinstein was like, okay, done with you. Like if you're not going to take direct orders, you're
Yeah.
off. You're off. You're out. So yeah. And then later, there was a credit situation. They wanted to give Kevin certain credit that I bucked up against because it wasn't deserved. And they offered me quite a few things to sign that piece of paper. And again, I wouldn't do it. So yeah, I think absolutely. They had contractually had to hear my pitch, but I think it was already written. But I would not be writing Resurrection.
Yeah. And good on you. First of all, good on you. There's something to be said about how the metaphor of right and wrong plays out, right, in our
Well,
real
that's the
lives.
thing. And,
Yeah.
and Chad, at the time, my wife was pregnant with our son, who's now 28, 29. And I just thought, how do I teach him you should do this, you should do that, like you're saying, right versus wrong, if I'm flying in the face of that myself, not
Yeah.
not living by example. And at the time, not that I would change anything, but at
Yeah.
the time you think, oh, so what? Like this is just one opportunity, many that are going to come.
Hmm.
So, I don't need you. Again, I would not, even though I know I struggled at times, I would not have made a different decision. But it was not easy.
Yeah. Yeah, that's like I said, good. In any industry, Hollywood's just one of those. Any of these industries where it tends to be kind of cutthroat, and
Yes.
it's limited spaces for very few people, and there's a multitude trying to clamor. And unfortunately, there are those games, and unfortunately, we did not get to see a follow up when we ended up with Resurrection, which I don't know. I would have loved to have been in the pitch room where someone was like, what if Buster Rhymes is kung fu fighting with Michael Myers, and someone was like, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
Let's
Yeah.
run it. I don't know. It's just there's
I know, and I was excited, Chad, because the director of Halloween 2, given what we have what we have to say about it, but still in the scope of all the series, I thought, oh, okay, maybe he gets the flavor, and I'd hoped we had kind of set up a lot of goodwill in
mm-hmm.
H2O, so I held out some hope, even though they didn't go with me.
Yeah.
Um, my pitch was very different. My pitch was kind of what had ended up happening. I mean, there are elements of Halloween Kills and those films. There was the copycat in one of those, and Halloween Ends. Right, there was like the copycat guy or the guy that admired
Yeah.
where he's
It
riding on the bike. It got weird.
ends. Yeah.
And and I won't pitch the whole thing, but the gist of my Halloween 9 was, yeah, that wasn't him. But they end up capturing him. They end up taking him to prison, and basically they put all his stuff in evidence. He's awaiting trial, right? You got the mask in evidence, you got the knife in evidence, you got his little jumpsuit in evidence, and now they're bringing everybody back to the surviving victims. They've brought back to Haddonfield for this trial
Hmm.
to testify. Well, guess who gets out? And you see him in that evidence room,
What?
and taking the thing out of the thing, and then it's just basically, you go from there. Uh, uh, but they didn't. They went with the internet, Busta Rhymes, and America's Next Top Model.
Yeah.
Uh, you know,
Yep, so be it. Yeah, that's in my mind. I still like to think of H2O as an ending and Resurrection as another alternate timeline,
yeah,
even though I know it wasn't written that way because of the forces that be. But in the end, right, the whole multiverse thing continued to expand because then you get the Rob Zombie films, and then by the time we get to Jamie Lee coming back for 40 years later, now
right.
all of a sudden, two is no longer part of the canon. H2O is not part of the canon. It's just from 1 to 40 years later. And so
Yeah.
it's just the multiverse expands. Now there's as many like Halloween timelines as there is X-Men timelines, and
Right.
it's just part of life. All right, so as we start to move into our close, we're gonna take a shift a little bit from the sort of the process into the philosophical, because part of this we've been looking at in these podcasts is story and evolution and the metaphor, the good and evil, the way that story drives us. So I wanted to start by doing truth, myth, or shades of gray.
Mm,
All right, so
okay.
these are some internet rumors, and you may or may not know whether or not these are true. So I'm just going to ask you and just to see what you have heard about them. So our first internet
Okay.
rumor:
What are my options again, Chad? True,
true, myth,
false,
or
or myth?
shades of gray. Yeah, it's
Okay.
true. That's true. That's a myth, or that there's elements of truth to that, but that's not how the whole thing plays out. And if it's just
Okay.
simply and I don't know, that's fine.
Okay.
These are just some of the rumors, and we want to try to dispel. We're an academic organization, so
Yes.
we like to get to the heart of the matter. Was there a version of the script that you are aware of where in fact Charlie was the killer pretending to be Michael Myers?
I want to say myth.
Okay, I'm going to
There,
take it
there's,
that you would know.
like I said, in many drafts, I don't remember doing a draft where Charlie was the killer, and I don't believe then there ever was one. I don't
Yeah,
think Matt did one. It was too close to filming.
I was I would have a hard time, especially that actor who's a lovely actor. I don't see him as being a robust buff serial killer
No.
type.
And
Yeah.
you know where this myth might have come from, Chad? And you read the draft, right? Where there was,
Uh,
he's part of the zeitgeist in their world, right? He's a serial killer that's been around a long time. So people dress up as him for Halloween.
mhm.
So there was a scene, I think, in one of those drafts where one of the students dresses up like him and they're playing a prank to
Correct.
try and scare somebody. There's a costumes shop scene with it, and so it might have kind of that myth might have come out of drafts that had elements of it where a student dressed up like him, and it might have been Charlie. I think he wasn't named Charlie in those early drafts, but it
Yeah.
was the character that became Charlie. That he's just dressed as Myers for Halloween.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
but yeah, maybe
Busted. We're going busted on that.
busted,
Myth
myth busted.
busted. Going back to the Mythbusters. Okay. You kind of alluded to this one already. You may not, again, this is one you may not know. So it goes back to the now infamous K&B mask, which is the alien mask. So the K&B mask. The internet rumor is that Steve Miner supposedly liked that K&B mask so much that even after people were reviewing it in dailies and saying this thing looks terrible, he insisted on filming the rest of the movie with it on. Uh, and then the new mask was ordered. Is this true? Do you know?
I'm going to say this is an educated dress, educated guess,
Okay.
because we are in an educational forum here. But I'm going to say
Yes.
true
Okay.
because they do watch dailies, and I cannot imagine a world in which somebody did not say this looks terrible, and the director is king. He
Yeah.
really is. I mean, until there's a coup. So that happened at some point, and maybe they started ordering the mask knowing, down the line. But yes, I'm going to guess true because
Okay.
I'm sure there are people who didn't like it, but again, the director has the final say.
All right. I like that. Excellent. Last one I have, and then I'm interested to know if you have heard any that you want to address. And that goes back to the CGI mask that was also mentioned, because there is the one bizarre scene where Charlie sees Michael with the CGI mask. Was the CGI mask used because the set that they had filmed on had already been torn down?
I don't know.
Okay.
That's a good question. Now, if I'm remembering right, that scene is in the kitchen or the.
Yes.
I mean, I'm going to say myth only because you could shoot it from an angle or you could do something. It wasn't. I'm going to say myth on that. It might be the reason, but
What?
there was a lot of other shots that they were able to reshoot. in that,
Yeah.
because that kitchen set or that scene is in that same place as the school. Like it was all in the
Yeah.
school. So I don't know why that particular room would not be available. And it's not like it was a lot of set dressing or anything that was expensive
Mhm.
about it. It wasn't like some big event or something they'd have to re.
Yeah. Yeah. 'Cause it's not even really a set, is it? It was an actual
Yeah.
like facility.
Yeah.
Okay. So there
Which
may be some.
hats off to Darren Okada, who's the DP, because it's very difficult to shoot in a practical location, lighting,
Yeah.
everything. You're limited by the space you have. You can't have lights hanging from the grids and everything else, and
Okay.
take a wall out to put your cameras. And
So we're going to say that one is probably somewhere between myth or shades of gray. Yeah, there had to be
yeah,
some reason, but we don't know
yes, but
why.
not sure what the reason is. Yes.
All right. So do you have any you want to address? Is there some great H2O myth out there, something from the internet
Gosh,
that you're like, I've seen this and I want to make it clear, yay or nay?
I mean, I would say there's a myth that Kevin, who did actually had a lot of input on the film, he did, Kevin Williamson, but that there was a treatment that he wrote that I wrote subsequent drafts from. So I used his treatment to write drafts, and
Okay.
that's a myth. He absolutely did write a treatment, but I'd already been writing drafts. It was like, and we were on the same page. What I realize now, many years later, is you don't know what you don't know, right? You only know what you're told. And
Mm-hmm.
knowledge is power in this business. And so, what I would attribute to somebody, maybe, and I'm not speaking to Kevin in particular, but I'm just saying, as I've gone through my career, which you might attribute to, plagiarism, or they saw that, or they stole my idea, you start to realize it's not that clean of a line. There's someone at the top that holds all the knowledge, and they disseminate the knowledge,
Hmm.
right? So, this person may not be aware at all of this idea, but it's pitched as an original idea from this person to them, even though that person got it from you. You know what I mean? Like you start
Mm-hmm.
realizing, oh, okay, uh, they only know what they know.
Yep.
And they do tend to, and this is something I've noticed over my career, producers and studios tend to silo you. Now it's done in the guise of, we want to protect you. You know, it all go through me. You don't have to deal with all these people. And at the time, you're just trying to write your script. So you're welcoming that. Oh, good. I don't have to listen to 1,000. I don't have to deal with 1,000. I just have to deal with you. Yes. And then you realize, oh, that's a form of control, right? That's how you
Sure.
disseminate knowledge. So you could say, I loved your draft, but these guys hated it, when it's really they had issue with it, or I wanted to keep you on, but this guy didn't. And so you're silent in a way you can't double check because you don't have a relationship with those other people. So yeah, I would say, yeah, that's probably one of them.
Okay.
But ultimately, what's nice about the Writers Guild is they do have an arbitration process. So the studio can say, Chad wrote Halloween H2O, and then I can say, wait a minute, no, he didn't, and you can say, yes, I did, and then there's a whole panel of people in panel that you give all your material, you give all the dates, you give everything, and they go, oh yeah, Chad did
Hmm.
it. No, this person did. This person just deserves credit. This person should get first position credit. This person, so they determine that, which is very useful. Now, it doesn't always go your way,
Yeah.
especially when
That's
it's kind of
interesting though.
shades of gray,
That's it.
because the first thing people do, Chad, this is a little secret. The first thing people do, I do not do this, when they're hired to rewrite someone's script, is they rename every character because it's harder to track the changes, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's harder. It's like, well, it seems all new because I can't say, oh, this character is this character in this draft. Um, but anyways, and they do that with an eye towards arbitration. So because sometimes I've been on arbitration committees and you're given 20 scripts
Mm-hmm.
by four different writers. I had arbitrated one of the Fantastic Four movies, and there was like 19 writers vying for credit, and there was like 26 drafts. And if you're doing your due diligence, which I do because I appreciate the process and I know how important it is. You read every draft and you're trying to
Mm-hmm.
draw correlations, and it's all a percentage based thing and all that. So, anyways, it's a fascinating thing.
That is, and yeah, it's kind of fast because as we talked about a little bit in our pre-production meeting, so to speak, we do a lot of that in terms of the academics with with West Star, and so like in looking at how documents evolve. So the way that Matthew and Luke use Mark as their draft, right, and they expand on
Yes.
that, and the way that
Yes.
they redact his work and that sort of stuff. I like that. That's one of the reasons why I think that movies speak so much to us about our history and existence as human beings, because whether it's plays, whether it's the written word, whether it's movies, we are driven by story, right, as people. And the
Yes.
stories that we happen around us, the stories we tell ourselves, those are stories that drive the human experience. And for you to kind of make this the philosophical core to what we've been talking about, I'm kind of curious. You already alluded to it, but first thing I want to ask you is, did you imagine your Michael Myers as a supernatural being?
I, I do. I think if it's a yes or no question, I would say yes. Because only a supernatural being could survive what he survived, the amount of
Mm-hmm.
time he survived. The joke always is, but what's he doing the other 364 days of the year? Like, is he going to Ralph's, or going to Smith's and, Kroger's and buying in bulk? How does he survive? What does he do? Like what? And I explain that by he is in essence a supernatural being, not in the sense of like a fallen angel or something, but almost like a demonic form in a physical being.
Mm-hmm.
It's how I explain it, and just the pure evil. There's just zero compassion in him. There's
Mm-hmm.
like zero humanity, and I think even in some of the worst uh, human beings and serial killers, there'll be some weird anomaly. It seems like, oh, they loved their mother, or they took care of
Mm-hmm.
pet, or there's some like humanity, as small as it is. Just like I think you could flip it, right? None of us are pure good, right? There's sin in all of us, obviously, to varying degrees. So it's interesting when you flip that, someone who's like 90% good, but yeah, there's a 10% asshole in there, and he comes out. Most people,
Mm-hmm.
they're not 100% evil. They're just not. They could be 80% evil, and that could do a lot of damage. But to me, Michael's like 100. He's the purest form, and I think the only thing that can be the purest form of evil isn't of this earth. That's what I would
Mm-hmm.
say. Is soulless.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
uh you definitely did it more subtly, right? Like he
Oh,
isn't being
absolutely.
he isn't being shot 50 times by hillbillies and falling into a well, right? Like that sort of thing. Just
Or
saying.
even just being burned, like when you talk about, Halloween 2, it's just the mask is melting. Like, what? I know they
Yeah.
show him burn when the mask comes off, but, yeah, I try to keep it because even though I don't see him supernatural. I think Michael Myers, the man,
Hmm.
is a vessel for the evil. I don't
Yeah.
think it's a spiritual entity,
Hmm.
like I'm saying, like an angel or something that is invincible, though he tends to be in a lot of the films, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, and the Halloween novelization would agree with you. So there is definitely
Yes,
that sense in
there you
which there,
go.
yeah. Now, kind of piggybacking on that, because again, you just touched on it a little bit, but serial killers, right? So you think about, your Gary Ridgways, your John Wayne Gacy's, Dennis Rader, the BTK killer. These were guys who are married, right?
Yeah.
They had kids, right?
Yes.
They had careers. Your Michael Myers did not have the soap opera benefit of being like a number four, where he went from burning alive to just being in a hospital in a coma, and then waking up magically years later on Halloween to go hunt down a niece that apparently he knows he has. Yours was a
Right.
little bit different, right? So 20 years later, he's in his 40s, right? So still quite capable. Has to go do the detective work to track down Loomis's old files and to find her. By the way, as a note for the future, maybe if you're ever hiding somebody, don't leave a file with their name on it that may have information. Just as a heads up. And by the way, because I know that in your original screenplay, your files did not say Laurie Strode.
Correct.
They used the fake name, which would have made sense. Apparently, the studio was like, "No, we need this to be crystal clear."
Yes.
But But um, what was what did you imagine your Michael Myers had been doing for 20 years? Obviously, he wasn't just sitting in a coma, at least not that we got. What was he out there doing during that time?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's what speaks to when people ask, like, what's he doing between Halloween and Halloween? You're right. What's he
Yeah.
doing for 20 years of that? Uh, I kind of gave him a pass on that. I mean, if I were to say, I'd say, he kind of crawls. He is in a coma. He's in a hospital. Like if we kind of fill in the narrative, he escapes. He's in the woods somewhere, in Illinois, and he's surviving the cold winters. He's in a cave. He's eating, deer, and he's just slowly building up his strength. And then there's that element of when, like, why now? You always ask yourself as a writer, why now? Like,
Mm-hmm.
why is someone doing that now? Why I couldn't, because it's 20 years later. That's why. And the studio wants a film. So that was harder to ask. Like, why did he wait 20 years? Like, why didn't he go? I'm sure he was healed within 5 years. Give him 5 years to kind of do the physical therapy, go in there and get the PT work done. But yeah, I mean, that's one of the buys. They say, yeah, well, there are many buys in the Michael Myers world, but that was the big one.
Mm-hmm.
Like you want people to put that out of their heads as far as what he's been doing, waiting
Yeah.
patiently.
Yeah. That might be the Robert Zappia story we need, is to address that
It's the in
issue.
between.
Yeah. Yeah. Because, you know, I was kind of thinking about it. So you're talking about from roughly 78 to 98.
Yeah.
During that time period, would have been very easy, particularly for him to be able to get some kind of alternate ID. You're thinking about the way in which people returning from like Vietnam, right? They, the way
Mm.
that their people may have just assumed this was some person who had come from Vietnam, right? Military veteran. There's all
Oh
sorts of,
yeah. The
there's also,
injuries.
yeah, there's
Yeah.
various ways in which you could imagine someone could actually have lived a fairly
That's
normal
interesting.
life
He's
for
like in a
those 20 years.
VA getting medical attention.
Yes, yes, and there's all sorts of angles. So I'm just kind of curious. Now, looking back, what do you see, thinking kind of as the metaphor of the film? What do you see as the chief metaphor of the film that you wrote as you intended it to be?
Oh man. That's tough. That's tough. Uh, I don't I'd have to think about that. It's been
Huh,
so long. I'd have to think about that. I'm
that's
curious
okay.
what your thoughts would be on it.
For me, when I watch it now, and especially working in, because I do things now like working in crisis intervention and
Yeah.
de-escalation and some of those types of things. For me, it stands out as the way that trauma and the need to confront trauma shapes our being.
Mm,
Because and that's one of the things I really love about the film, is that it actually was character driven. It wasn't driven by sexuality. It wasn't driven by over the top kills. It was driven by Jamie Lee Curtis in this just absolutely beautiful performance as a person who went from the innocence of Paradise Lost to this very different, broken, hurt woman in what you might call Paradise Regained, right, or Paradise Restored.
mhm.
We pick up her character in Milton-esque fashion, where she is now down the road. She's had to reinvent her identity. It's shaped everything about her, and this incredible moment where she realizes, I'm not running anymore, right? I am going to confront this horror head on, right? That's that scene of her walking back into the light with the axe, screaming Michael. I mean, that's as good as it gets in Halloween, because
Yeah.
it's that moment for all of us where, as human beings, we all face trauma. Some of us have faced a lot more than others, right?
Right.
And
Yes.
what trauma does to us as human beings is remarkable. It just has such a debilitating factor, and that's something that I really take away. Something I'm so appreciative of from you and the way that you wrote this story is that it really is a message of hope for confronting those darkest parts of ourselves, right? That
Yeah.
we all have this Michael Myers, so to speak, in our lives. And for some of us, Michael Myers is a very powerful force because of things that happened in our youth. I think of women who have been sexually assaulted and how that sexual assault has terrorized their lives, people who grew up in very abusive homes, people who are in abusive relationships, right? And there seems like no escape, this looming specter of the shape that confronts our psyche and the horrors that it brings upon us, and the hope that we can actually defeat that trauma. Now please understand, it's metaphor. I'm not saying go out and cut the head off of the person who's
Right.
causing you grief, right? Like, it's metaphor, right? It's defeating the trauma that's
Yes.
personified in Michael Myers.
But thank you for articulating that so well. And in doing so, you made me realize something, that everything you just said, you could lay on top of Pray for the Devil.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing,
Absolutely.
right? She's dealing with the trauma of her childhood. Now, this dealing with the demonic force that she ultimately ends up learning the tools to deal with and confronts in the climax of the film. Very similar
Yes.
metaphor. You could basically lay that same metaphor. And it is something that I've been fascinated with for whatever reason. I'm blessed not to have had any kind of trauma in my childhood,
Yeah.
that I remember. That's beyond just the typical stuff. I was a very and thank you for the comment of the character oriented story, because that is what I try to do. I was a very quiet, shy child,
Mm-hmm.
kind of a recluse, but I was always very observant and fascinated by behaviors, by people, and people who would be maybe less than kind, in school. I was always questioning, well, why? Like, why are they that way? Were they born that way? Did something happen to them? You hear the typical thing, like the bully is the bully because they're home, like they're bullied at home, or whatever it is. It was
Mm-hmm.
always interesting to me. I think if I wasn't a writer, I would have probably gone into some form of psychology. It's a fascinating topic. I think I'd be too affected
Mm-hmm.
by the real instances of these things. It's one
Sure.
thing to dabble in it in fiction and pontificate and what if, and you could write where they do win and they do overcome. Every film you hope they do, whereas in real life that's not always the case. So I think it would maybe have a little too much impact on my psyche. So
Understand. So our wrap up question, this is for you because I know that for you, the spiritual component of your writing is very important and it's part of your own spiritual life. Has the spiritual message of H2O personally changed for you from when you wrote it, and how your world has changed in the past, 20 plus years?
I would say it's been pretty consistent. As I mentioned, it's always been something I've just given a lot of thought to as a child, which I think I look back now, I think is normal for a child to think a lot about. Is good versus evil, not just in the flesh, but just spiritually. And it wasn't like we were taught it in school. It wasn't something obviously you're not going to teach a third grader about. But I was a scared kid. Like I was
Mm,
very frightened of a lot of things. I didn't see my first horror film probably till I was 15 or so. I just had enough of an imagination that I can imagine things on my own. One of the first films I saw was The Exorcist,
mm,
and that was not good.
yeah,
That was not
that's
good.
it's a hard one to start with.
That's a tough one. Like I needed to ramp up. I had to do like Gremlins or something. Like something a little like, lighthearted, or Ghostbusters. Something a
Hmm.
little bit less intense. But yeah, I think if anything, it's grown, it's deepened, and my faith has deepened, and my resolve. I've become more interested, kind of in the. I think I mentioned in one of our pre-production meetings that I just am 57. I've never read the Bible cover to cover.
Hmm.
Just haven't. Not. So I've started that journey. I'm about halfway through.
Nice.
So kind of looking into that, watching your very fascinating series on the Book of Revelation, which we talked about quite a bit. And I'm going to have a question for you. You can cut this out, but a lot of storytelling, Chad, is starts with the question for me of what if. That's always how a story begins for me. What
Mhm.
if XYZ? What if a nun wanted to become an exorcist? Right? There's your
Yep.
story. I did a film called 5 Days to Midnight. What if you received your unsolved case file for your own murder that's happening in 5 days?
Mm.
What? Okay. What if? Like it's always a what if. And I stumbled upon what is considered conspiracy theory or whatever you want to call it. Is Satan's Little Season?
Okay.
Have you heard of this? Have you heard of this one?
Mm-mm.
Oh, you haven't.
No.
Oh, it's not. Oh,
Satan's Little
Chad.
Season.
Oh, you got to look
Yeah.
into this because I'd be
Okay.
curious your thoughts. It's out there. But
Okay.
the book of Revelations, I believe it's chapter 20, that talks about after he's been put in the pit and chained, there'll
Oh,
be 1,000 years,
the release of Satan
the
after the
release of
millennium.
Satan for a short
Okay.
time or a little season.
Correct. Okay, that's
What
what you're.
if?
Okay.
Let's go into the what if now.
Okay.
What if that's the season we're in now? That the
Okay.
1,000 years happened already,
Hmm.
Tartaria and all that,
Hmm. Okay.
And
Yeah.
now we're in the second half. So anyway, it's just a fun. That just to say, I'm having fun exploring spirituality and things, and of course, the writer's mind always goes to those what if questions. I love the Twilight Zone. It was always on
Hmm.
every Thanksgiving. You'd have the marathon, and you just watch all these Twilight Zones, and that's just the big what if. Like,
Hmm.
what if it wasn't a book to help us? What if it was a cookbook? Like what if like all those
It's a
episodes?
cookbook.
It's
Yes,
a cookbook.
it's a cookbook. But
So,
yeah.
anyways,
Yeah.
I digress. But
No, it's on point, right? Because even something like that, it reflects the way that our views change. Because I have a upcoming book with my colleague Art Dewey and illustrator Steve Ross. It's called Revelation and Revenge: Confronting Christian Nationalism, and we actually look at the history of Revelation, where, for example, today you have so much of the evangelical world that's focused on the belief that the millennium is this coming 1,000 years, right? A literal
right,
1,000 years that
yeah.
for much of the history of Christianity, the belief was we are in the millennium, that this is the period in which the
Oh,
gospel has come and that the kingdom of God is upon the earth. And that's what the essence of the millennium was, is that the arrival of Christ is the binding of Satan, and that the gospel is actually winning the
interesting.
day, not losing the
Okay.
day, right? But
Okay.
it ties in beautifully, right? Because the way that the story has evolved, into today is everything is just sinful and chaotic, and Jesus has to come back any moment now to take care of all of this. But of course, from a historical standpoint, we always ask the question, is the world really that much more sinful today? Because we can probably point to any time in
I
history.
was going to say, not what I'm reading
Yeah.
in that
And
Old
and
Testament.
yeah, and look at everything, right? But it's the way that our stories evolve, and and that's kind of it's fascinating tie-in, right? Because that's the way it is with Halloween. Halloween has such an intriguing, evolving story. That through time, the way in which we have rewrote it, we've retold ourselves, and just like in something like Revelation, where every generation will read Revelation on its own terms and have its own conclusions. I
Mm,
have a hunch we're probably not done with Halloween stories. Michael Myers, I'm guessing, is going to come back at some point,
I'd imagine another
but
timeline.
yeah, but he has been, but his story of evil and Laurie Strode's story of good and confronting that evil continues to be retold in new metaphors and new ways of thinking about our world today.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I am surprised how many people like my daughter's 22, how many of her friends are fans of H2O? Like
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of found a new, and like you say, it still resonates because
Mm-hmm.
there will always be this battle, and it's still the fundamental core of the film will always ring true, I think, with audiences.
Yeah,
Um, and it's timeless
yes, it is.
until hopefully it's not. It would be nice when it's no longer like not a problem, but
Yeah. Well, and that's what happens when you get a good writer who comes in and gives a story the treatment it deserves, which you, sir, you did. And
thank you,
that's
Chad.
that's why I'm so grateful that you were willing to join us to work through these conversations. And for all of you, I hope that this two-parter has provided some insight. Hopefully, it takes some meaning. And my big thank you to Robert Zappia for joining us on Bible Search and Rescue. And please go check out his IMDb page. Look at his various credits. He's got quite a diverse spectrum of writing, and
I've
you
got
can
something for everyone in the family. I got
Yes, he
something for
does.
all of you.
Yeah, if you need an ABC mouse, a Tom and Jerry, if you're looking for a possessed nun who can bend backwards, or if you're looking for Michael Myers, this man has done it all. But sir, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us and for sharing your heart and your insight.
Thanks so much, Chad. It
All
was a
right,
pleasure.
thank you to all of you. Thank you so much for joining us. Until next time, go out and make the world a better place for somebody else. Take care.